Conversion rate optimization is still one of the best ways to improve the performance of your e-commerce store. Every day we see agencies and brands come to us. We always see the same mistakes. So what I'm going to do in this video, I'll take you through the 5 most common mistakes that we see 90+ e-commerce brands make and how you can avoid those to generate better performance for your store. Okay, first up, qualitative research. This is what we see most companies not do at all because they're afraid it's going to be too time sensitive. You know what's time sensitive? Making the wrong mistakes and testing things that are not even going to move the needle. So what you should always start with is really understand the psychology of the user, right? Where are they at in their buying stage and what's going through their mind when they're actually reading what's on your page and what the heck you have to offer. Everybody knows quantitative research, right? You're going through a bunch of reports from GA4 and you're trying to identify where people are dropping off. Definitely important and definitely keep doing that. But what's qualitative research is where you're actually getting valuable written text input from your customers. There are a few ways of doing this. A very simple one is to install a small survey on your site. This is a tool that most people don't even see on your site if they're not focused on it. But you can make it more prominent after viewing a certain amount of seconds on your page or after seeing 4 or 5 pages when you're really sure someone is very interested and won't be scared away by a little pop-up that comes up. It doesn't have to be in the middle of the screen. It could be like the size of a chatbot that sometimes is at the bottom right of someone's screen. Just a very tiny pop-up that could ask them questions like, what is holding you back from purchasing? Or what is the reason you haven't purchased yet? Or what do you think is the key feature on this product? Like small product questions that might give you a good indication of why they're struggling. And of course, you can show it at different stages in the funnel, right? If you're interested about testing the PDP, you would show it there. But if you're interested about checkout or even post-purchase, you can ask them other things. On the post-purchase is an interesting place to ask questions because these are for people who are really interested in your product, right? So there you can discover better what are key unique selling points that these users were very interested in and were willing to put their credit card down for. And that should help you, of course, better tell your customers who are still at the beginning of the funnel, what is it that they need to know that otherwise they might leave. The third mistake we see e-commerce brands make is that they are not prioritizing the tests correctly. And this is still part of the research phase. All the 3 mistakes I've currently mentioned is what we spend most of our time on, right? Because as I said earlier, making the wrong mistakes is very costly. So make sure you make mistakes correctly and you learn from them. So in this prioritization mistake, what we normally do is we categorize all our IDs into different orders, right? We want to make sure that we're not only implementing something that's the easiest, but definitely also something that's probably going to give the best results. So there are certain frameworks out there. One is, for example, called ICE, which stands for ease of implementation, confidence, and the impact it might have. The downside of this one, it's highly subjective. So someone who's very confident about this might be disagreeing with someone who thinks otherwise. And that's, of course, a problem. You want to make sure you are as factual as you can possibly be. Another one is the CLX method, which asks you questions like, is it above the fold? Would you see it within 5 seconds? These are objective questions everybody would agree with. Eventually you have a score, each test gets a score, and then you sort them from high to low. This is a good place to start, and theoretically this is the way to go. In practice it's slightly different. What we often aim for is to make the best use of our time. So even if the test with the highest score takes 2 weeks to implement, including design and development, then we've already lost a week. So what we want to do is see if we have another test that we can fit in different empty spots to make sure that we have always a test running throughout the site without, of course, that they're conflicting each other. Because I'd rather run 1 test on a page than 4. So starting with the big blocks of tests that you prioritize and then filling in the little gaps with other tests that you can run. And of course here planning is crucial. Make sure you have a timeline. We really like to use like a Gantt chart, so it's a visual representation over time categorized by the page or category of pages. So we make sure we make the most use of our time. What we often see go wrong is that the copy is not optimized. This is the best way to communicate your product to your customers. So how do you make sure that you differentiate yourself from your competitor? And the best way to do that is copy. Often, especially larger brands, are incredibly focused on their branding, their positioning, their images. How cool do they look? Which might make more sense if you're a bigger brand and you don't only sell through your e-commerce store. But often it's very distracting for the customer and it drives them away from actually reading your copy. If you look at the page from Apple, this is often the example given. It's a massive, incredibly long page, right? It answers a lot of questions, but of course they're also very brand focused. But if you look at the other side, let's say trivago.com, it's just a white background. They don't care about branding, they just want you to convert. If you look at all the pages from ClickFunnels, these are the ugliest pages. Or Amazon, white, ugly pages, but they do convert because it's less distracting and it allows you to tell the reader all your unique selling points, right? Why they should buy. So the copy that you write should be very specific about the benefits that you offer. What is it that you can provide to your customer? Not necessarily the features, the specifics, why you exist for 10 years. Nobody cares about that crap. But still, it's very difficult to do this right. The other thing that's very challenging is to understand what's going on in the mind of your customer. So you've probably worked on this for years and you know exactly how it works. And it's very hard to unlearn that, right? Once you know something, it's very difficult to kind of forget about it. So it's also very difficult to understand specifically what struggles your customers are facing, which is hence why it's very helpful to have these forms on your site. Get input, right? Understand where they are struggling. And then you need to make sure that you provide everything they need to understand from A to Z what the product does, what is it in for them, what are the risks, what are the downsides, everything about it. And then the other thing to do this well is talk to your customer support team, understand what are the questions asked by the customers, why are they refunding products, or what are even the best reviews out there. These are the things. The good stuff, you add it to the site. The bad stuff, you cannot ignore them. It's important that you communicate this, that you solve the problems before they even buy, right? If they're afraid it won't fit in their home, make sure that you say it fits in 90% of the homes or tackle that objection. And only that way you're removing all the stress from the user and you're making sure that this is the product for them. A nice way of saying this is your offer needs to be so good that you're the one staying up at night to make sure to deliver on this promise. That you cannot sleep because you're afraid you're not gonna over deliver, instead of the customer who's afraid that you might be a scam or that your product might not be better than the competitor's product. Make sure you communicate accurately why you are the best solutions. And then lastly, the fifth mistake, whether you need to go for a big swing or a small test. We've ran over 200 tests by now, and what we can say with confidence is that if your site is not very well optimized, your conversion rate is incredibly low, it's often better to go for a bigger swing, right? Either go big or go home. You will see drastic changes. Even if you don't have the traffic to statistically validate this, you might still be able to see the actual change in your conversion rate. What you need to make sure of is that once your site is already good, it's decent, try to go for incremental growth. Try to learn from every test that you run, every change. If you're going to go all in, you're probably losing a lot of time because creating completely new pages is very time consuming. And within that time, you could have tested small things and learned from why they're not working or why they are working. Generally, most of the small tests fail, which is fine. If your completion rate is still 50%, it's still very good. Going for big changes requires big resources, and if they do fail, it's often very difficult to understand why, even if you've tracked everything with GA4 or any other tracking tool. So going for smaller changes often allows you to gain incremental growth, you learn a lot faster, you fail a lot faster, and that's baggage you can put in your suitcase to grow further and know that you're going into the right direction. To show you how easy this could be and how actually affordable it could be, because it sounds complicated, but I'll show you how you can do it a lot cheaper. So the first one is Hotjar. This is probably one of the most popular tools out there. Of course, they're known for their heat maps and their screen recordings, but they also offer surveys. So this is their landing page. If I just scroll through it, I think here there's some examples. These are indeed pretty small, like I said earlier. One good example is actually this feedback option, right? This is as tiny as it can be, and I bet you had not seen this until I mentioned it. So someone who's really struggling with the page, but is still dedicated to make a purchase, otherwise they wouldn't have stayed that long, they do see these little elements where you offer help or ask a question, and they tend to be very willing to answer. So it could be as tiny as this one, but it can give incredibly valuable information. What you often want to do is start off with a very simple question, like for example this one. You just click one of the numbers, that's it, which already shows that someone's interested in doing this. And then you can ask them, okay, can you clarify or can you answer any of the other questions, right? So it gets them started very easily. It gives some features, changing colors, doesn't really matter. When it comes to their pricing, let's see what they cost. We're interested in monthly. This is $50 a month, their first plan. The free plan does not look like it has surveys. AI survey generator. Free plan, it seems to have it. I'm not sure how extensive it is in the free plan, but on the growth plan, wait, we saw another one. The growth plan of $50 a month, you can definitely get a lot of survey responses. And it's definitely worth the investment. If you do it for 1 month, you can get a lot of data. Another page would be Surveycate. Very similar tool. It helps you gather customer survey data. So here are a few examples. These probably look a little bit nicer, but it honestly doesn't really matter. You just want them to be tiny and effective, and how they look it's generally out of the question. When I look at the pricing, this one is certainly a lot more expensive compared to Hotjar, but it does offer a free plan as well to get 25 responses. Often 25, you can already learn a lot. And of course you want to have more, but it's not like quantitative data where you need a lot to prove something. Any response is helpful. And then the last one is to actually have some user testing. There are a lot of tools out there, but the pricing I think tends to be between 30 and $100 per recording. So here you actually give instructions to someone. Hey, please visit this page and tell me what you think, what you see. And then they actually follow this while recording their screen and then their voice, and then you can later listen back to it. So this is a very qualitative research method to get a good understanding. And it doesn't require you to set up a target group and find a few parents that can help out. It's a lot easier and quicker. And of course it also allows you to get a much diverse demographic. To show you how I would analyze the different segments of my marketing data, I'll just take you quickly to GA4. I guess everybody's familiar with it. Some people like it, some people don't. But I would just say definitely learn the basics or get another tool that you are more familiar with. GA4 of course is free, so just learn how it works and you have a good tool. So one of the most common reports of course is the funnel report. This of course requires accurate tracking, but gives you a visual representation of where users are dropping off the most, right? We start here with the most users, of course everybody, and then we drop off. And then percentage improvement here causes more people to drop to the next funnel, which of course is what we want. Here in this case, we can already see a lot of users dropping off, meaning they see the site, but they do not see a product, right? Only 32% ends up seeing a product. This is fairly low. So this is already a good thing to start with. It's different for every site, so definitely analyze why. Based on these graphs, I would assume that they're not running a lot of paid traffic, because these of course always have to arrive either on the landing page or on a product page. If in this case they're not, that's already a win that you can implement. And then of course a lot of users are seeing the product page and then you want them to add to cart. So here we're also seeing a huge drop off here. I think this one is even more interesting. So if I just look at this is probably the biggest pain point, even though here are the biggest numbers. Both of course are crucial. This helps you understand where are the gaps in the funnel. You will identify where do I need to spend my energy on to find a better solution. What that solution is often comes from like a heuristic review or a UI UX review. So the data will tell you where to focus on. But as I mentioned, don't stop there, right? We're currently breaking down the funnel report by device category. This helps us understand what device performs well and which one don't. So I would just discard tablet and smart TV. They're just a very small percentage across all e-commerce stores. So when it comes to mobile and desktop, we see a lot more mobile traffic. This is very common because it's often a lot cheaper, right? But the conversion rate generally on desktop is higher. What we're currently seeing is in this case, it's different. A mobile converts better than desktop. Of course, you want to split it by way more things, and it gives you here a drop down that you have to select from. But what I tend to do is if you click this explore icon, you can create your own report, and it automatically pre-populates all the information that we just saw. But now it gives you a lot more information here on the left to play with, right? And the table here at the bottom changes too. Now it shows us the completion rate as well, the amount of abandons and the abandonment rate. This is very helpful to understand which segmentation performs well across each step in the funnel, right? So if I scroll all the way to the bottom, we can see for the purchase event, mobile converts at 0.36%, while desktop at 0.19. Both are of course incredibly low and worth to work on. But if I would be interested in seeing something else, let's say the region, imagine you're a clothing store, you sell winter clothing. Of course the behavior in New York will be very different from Los Angeles. So even there, you can segment what you're showing to these users. So in this case, we're seeing state, and the conversion rate for Scotland is the highest across the board. Again, these numbers are very small, but they're a good example. You want to continue doing this before you test, after you test. This way you can actually understand what segment is a winner and what's a loser. Okay, diving into the different prioritization methods. The first one is ICE. You're looking for the score that fits all three criteria. Eventually you just put it into a table, a very simple table with your ID. You score based on each of the three criteria. It gives you a score. Eventually this community tab is the winner. That's where you need to start. As I mentioned, this is not the most objective way of doing it. So that's why we recommend to use the PXL method from another agency called CLX. You just add your IDs and then you score them based on these criteria, right? So above the fold, noticeable within 5 seconds, adding or removing an element. Removing, of course, is much easier than adding. Designed to increase user motivation, running on high traffic pages, etc., etc. Also here you have eventually a score, and you will have a few winners that you can start on. Very easy method, but it makes a very big difference in your planning. So I would definitely recommend to have a look at this. So there you have it, the top 5 most common mistakes that we see e-commerce brands make. I've told you exactly what those are and how we as a CRO agency overcome these on a daily basis. So now you should be ready to go out there and solve your problems and grow your business to the next level.